All right, so let's get this show on the road. Welcome, everybody, to the Speedrun game. Last couple of games have been really instructive, really instructive. So we're riding a pretty good streak. Those watching on YouTube, welcome to you as well. I want to thank everybody who subscribes and supports the channel. We're very, very close to 300k subs, which is a big milestone for me. So the best way to support the channel, if you like the content and you like what I do, is just to hit the subscribe button. All right, we're playing an 1140 with the white pieces, and we continue to play my sort of official opening recommendations, and we are facing the French defense. Okay, so those of you who've watched my speedrun more assiduously, you will probably remember what my official recommendation is against the French. And this is a very dangerous line that hits a couple of different targets at once. On the one hand, it's very dangerous from a theoretical standpoint. If black is not careful, then white can get a big objective advantage. But this line also teaches you a lot about closed structures and a lot about positional chess in general. So it's always good to have a line like this in your pocket that basically forces you to display your knowledge of certain typical structures and certain important positional ideas. And the line that I'm alluding to is not the Tarrasch, which I play at my level. I play the move knight to d2. But a line that I have also played over the board, and I think the official name for it is the Nimzowitsch French. It starts just like an advanced French. We start by playing the move e5. This is the advance. And black responds with c5. So this is standard fare. And here the move, which is almost automatic for most people, is, of course, to support the pawn chain by pushing c3. And that leads to very theoretical waters. The advanced French is a totally viable weapon, and it's gained a lot of popularity in recent years. So even at, super high level. But the line that has slipped through the cracks is actually to play this without c3, and instead to develop your pieces as if nothing is the matter. So the Nimzowitsch French goes knight to f3. We simply develop our knight, and we allow black to ruin our pawn chain by playing c takes d4. So you can go back through the first speedrun and look at a couple of games in which I played this line. I will do a quick overview of the basic ideas once again in case this is the first time that you're seeing the move knight f3. If it is the first time you're seeing knight f3, then you should be very, very surprised because it seems utterly counterintuitive to allow the pawn chain to be destroyed, let alone to sacrifice the pawn on d4, which is what we're going to do. And here we continue playing as though black is not exerting any pressure on d4. We continue developing our pieces. Now, people who are less experienced in the French, one common mistake that I see players making is that they play, no, not bishop b6, but bishop b5 in this position is a very common move at the beginner level. That is not a good move. The bishop on b5 is not futile. And it's not bad because it loses a piece. It doesn't lose a piece. Queen a5 check. There is knight c3. So it's bad from a conceptual standpoint. The bishop on b5 is a total paper tiger, and black can just block the pin with bishop d7. So the best square in such positions for white's bishop, and we're going to deploy the bishop to that square right now, is actually d3. And there's many reasons for that. Anytime you have, a pawn on d4 like this, putting the bishop behind the pawn is good practice. In case black castles kingside, which is the likeliest direction that black will eventually castle, we will have a Greek gift sacrifice at the ready. But I hear the thought that's on your mind, doesn't black just have c4, pushing the bishop back to e2? Well, they do, but we have provoked c4, and because the center is relatively closed, we can afford in such positions to make more than one move with the same piece. So what has white achieved by provoking the move c4? Well, a couple of very specific things. First of all, we've taken a lot of the pressure off of the d4 pawn. We no longer have to worry about our pawn chain getting destroyed, so we can instead focus on more important things like quickly completing our kingside development. Now, black's pawn chain on the queen side might seem very imposing, and the move b5 is actually good. But in fact, black has bitten off a lot more than she can chew. Okay? And the reason for that is that black is pushing all of their pawns on the queen side without supporting them with his or her pieces. And what we can do is use our pawns in a kind of very typical idea to break down the entire pawn chain that black is building up on the queen side. And the way that we do that is by putting pressure simultaneously on both the c4 pawn as well as the b5 pawn. And we have both pawns that can do that. We play the move b3, setting up pressure on the c4 pawn, and we follow up with the move a4, a very, very important motif. This is kind of classic pawn play to break down black's pawn chain as quickly as possible. And we can do it without delay. We can castle, we can take a move and complete our kingside development, but we don't even need to do that. We can just straight up play a4 in this position, and black is already under very serious fire on the queen side. And one important tactical detail that you should notice is that a6 is futile here because of a takes b5, and black cannot recapture with the a pawn because the rook on a8 hangs. So that's part of the reason it's important to do this in timely fashion. If we had allowed black to play the move bishop to b7, which is not played to develop the bishop to an active square, it's played in order to defend the rook. a4, while still a pretty decent move, is a lot less effective on account of a6. That move is now possible. So here this is rather time sensitive, and with the rook on a8 undefended, a4 is a very powerful move. Bishop a6. So our opponent conceptually is playing reasonably. Here she is trying to protect the pawn chain with the pieces, with the minor pieces, but it's not going to work because the minor pieces are just not very good at keeping the pawn chain intact. And even though black is going to avoid losing pawns immediately, we're still going to break up the pawn chain. So which pawn should we take first? Well, normally we should begin by eliminating the base of the pawn chain. Step one is to play a takes b5, eliminating the kind of linchpin on b5. Now, step two would, of course, be to then take the pawn on c4, opening up the center, and creating a major weakness on c4 as a result. Now, we can also kind of ignore the situation and we can just castle. But far more to the point and far more kind of consecutive is to play the move b takes c4. And as a result of the trade, black is going to get a massive weakness on c4. Bishop takes c4, and now, of course, we complete the trade with bishop takes c4. And after d takes c4, we have achieved precisely what we set about to do on the queen side. We have created long-term permanent weaknesses on the queen side. What are those weaknesses? Well, the main weakness is this pawn on c4. And step three is going to involve two kind of mini steps. We need to complete our development. It's going to be hard for us to operate to our full capacity without castling and without solidifying our own pawn chain. How are we going to solidify our pawn chain? What move comes to mind here as kind of an automatic move if you're a French player with white? What is kind of the general solidifying move that we're going to play at some point? Yeah, that's the move c3. Now you might say, well, wait a second, isn't the c3 square, shouldn't that be reserved for the knight? No, the knight doesn't go to c3 in such positions. It's going to go out to d2 because remember, the ultimate idea is to harass and ultimately win the c4 pawn. So what's going to be the order of operations here? Well, we can do things in a bunch of different orders. I like the idea. What appeals to me is just castling kingside first, just to get the king out of the danger zone, make sure that there are no nasty checks on b4. Then after that, to play the move c3. And only after those two preliminary steps are complete can we go about the process of surrounding and winning the c4 pawn. So castling first is safe because black has no good way to attack the d4 pawn. Rook d8 is a very likely move at this level, and just in time, we follow up with the move c3. Notice also in that position that knight takes e5 is not possible because the knight on f3 guards the e5 pawn. So our opponent is trying to open up the center, which is a counterproductive idea because black is lacking in development. And this is an important moment for me to highlight the idea of flexibility, right? We created this entire elaborate scheme where we were going to go c3, and then we were going to go knight bd2. But black's last move has changed absolutely everything. f6 is a huge move, and we need to understand how that impacts our course of action. Well, it changes our course of action entirely because black is inviting us to open up the center. Now, who benefits in the event that the center opens up? Well, the side that's better developed and the side with less pawn weaknesses. And clearly, In both cases, that's white. So we should actually welcome the opening of the center. And we should do that just by taking on f6 and saying, you want to open up the center? Thank you very much. I'm going to open up the center. And I'm going to open up the e file on which sits a massive pawn weakness on e6. Now, combining the two previous observations, right? There are two big weaknesses in black's camp. The pawn on e6, the newly created weakness, but nothing happened to the old weakness of c4. So putting those two things together generates for us the move queen to e2, hitting both of these pawns at once. That's the classy move. Now, a good alternative to queen e2 would be the simple rook e1. We could say, hey, I don't care about the c4 pawn. What I care about more is the pawn on e6. That's the juicy pawn. If we win that pawn, we're probably going to checkmate black in a matter of a couple moves. Furthermore, after queen e2, as some of you are astutely pointing out, there's the nasty move knight takes d4. And that leads to a slightly complicated line. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4. We grab the pawn on e6 with check. Black plays bishop e7, and I'm not entirely sold on the fact that white has a crystal clear way to capitalize on the attack there. So a more controlled move in this position would just be to play the move rook e1, leaving the queen on a defensive spot for now to guard the d4 pawn. And it's incredibly hard for black to defend the pawn on e6. That is a huge weakness, and black's lack of development is really costing her here, as you can see. Because if black had already developed the bishop on f8, then they would be able to castle kingside. And we would still take the pawn on e6, but black would get a pretty major lead in development in that case. Now black just doesn't have the time to complete the development. King f7 is an attempt to defend the pawn on e6, but it's futile. The king is not a good defender in these kinds of positions. How should we proceed in this position? How should we proceed in this position? Yeah, there's a rip move. And of course, that move is the simple fork on g5, knocking the king back to g8. The game is not over. The game is far from over. We won a pawn, but we still need to demonstrate some good technique, especially considering the fact that we have not completed our queen. We haven't even started our queenside development. So we're going to have to play this accurately if we want to win the game fast. Okay, so I'm anticipating king to g8 here. Our opponent is playing very fast, and that's a risky thing to do in a position with a king this wide open. King e7. Whoa. Okay, our opponent just walks right into the pin. That's a terrible move. But how do we punish it in the most clinical way? What's the order of operations here? Well, you might be tempted here by the move knight takes e6 to set up a potential discovery. Knight takes e6 is okay, but it gives black a new lease on life. Knight takes e6 allows the king to step away from the discovery with king f7 and then go back to g8. A much better approach here would be to take on e6 with the rook, but not because it's a check, right? The fact that it's a check is a nice byproduct. What I'm noticing here is that there's a pin against the knight on c6. So on the next move, we can actually pre-move d5, and that ends the game on the spot because it wins the knight on c6. And once the minor piece is gone, the black king is also getting hunted down mercilessly here. So d5 is the game-winning move, and we're going to win this game really without our entire queenside. We won't even need, most probably, our knight on b1 and bishop on c1. That's how powerful our existing pieces are. Yeah, it's a little bit too late to start thinking, but you do often see this at this level where people kind of rattle off these opening moves, and then by the time it's too late, they start thinking. Yeah, the game is totally over. We're taking the knight on the next move. The knight cannot move because the queen is pinned, and it's going to be checkmate in 3 moves here. It's going to be checkmate in 3 moves. Who can give me the entire checkmating line from start to finish? And if you're watching on YouTube, try to generate that line as well. It's a simple mating line, but it's always good practice to try to visualize these lines in your mind. It really gets the wheels turning. Without moving the queen, not DC and queen d7. The d7 square is protected by the knight on f6. DC is correct. And then the next move is Washington. No, just kidding. After DC king c7, what's the mating move? I never said there's a moratorium on bringing the queenside pieces out. Bishop f4 is the mating move. Very good. DC check. The knight defends the rook, which is very important. And after king c7, the mating move is bishop f4. Technically, black has bishop d6. That's why it's mate in 3. And queen takes d6 there is checkmate. Simple, straightforward attacking chess. Bringing the bishop out. with a devastating check and ending the game on the spot. Yeah, straightforward game. And you can see the power of the line that we played in the French. It's an incredibly powerful line at any level, I would say 2300 and under. So let's quickly go over the game. We played the line that I have played previously in the speedrun, and this is what I have played almost exclusively when we faced the French across all of the speedruns I've had thus far. So e5 is the advanced French, but now we deviate from standard waters with the move knight f3. And knight f3 has kind of an interesting history. This move has been around for a very long time, and Aaron Nimzowitsch, who I'm sure most people watching have heard of, he is, of course, one of the kind of patriarchal figures of modern positional chess. He wrote a very famous book called My System in the 1920s, which kind of laid out a lot of the positional concepts that we now take for granted. I mean, he was the originator of overprotection and prophylaxis, and he talked about square control and trades. I mean, when he released My System, all of these concepts were not in the common chess vocabulary. So people were reading that book with their mouth kind of open, like, oh my God, this is amazing. Now, knight f3 was first played in the year, let me check. It was first played in the year 1826 by an unknown player. And Nimzowitsch was maybe the 7th or the 8th guy to play knight f3, but he was playing it religiously. Nimzowitsch faced the French a lot, and he played knight f3 exclusively. So it was pretty impressive to generate this idea in the early 1900s. And most of Nimzowicz's opponents actually did not play c takes d4. So after c takes d4, Nimzowitsch was the first player to realize that the best move in this position is not knight takes d4. This just defeats the purpose of the line. Does that make sense? Knight takes d4 is not where the party's at. Black can just go knight c6. And this begs the question, well, why on earth didn't you play c3 if this is how you want to play? Instead, white needs to aim for very rapid development. What is the actual move after c takes d4? Who can tell me? No, it's not queen takes d4. That walks into knight c6 even more blatantly. It's bishop d3. Good memory. Bishop d3. And the basic idea of this line, according to Nimzowitsch, is that the pawn on e5 is, there's no name for this pawn, but it's like a clamp pawn. It clamps down very effectively on black's position, severing the connection between the queen side and the king side, making it difficult for black to get her pieces out effectively. In particular, it prevents knight f6, it prevents bishop d6, and it makes it very difficult for black to breathe. And white is going to accelerate his king side development as much as possible. So for example, if black just develops normally, let's say knight c6, and we have faced this in the speedrun, white castles, and already you can see how difficult it is for black to develop comfortably. So if black plays, let's say bishop c5, we are not trying to win the pawn back quickly. We're trying to win it back eventually. And the way that we're going to do that is by putting the b1 knight on what square? Who can tell me what square the knight on b1 usually belongs on in this line? So it goes to d2, but what's the final destination? Very good. The knight belongs on this very nice b3 square where it's out of the way of the bishops. It's not obstructing the bishops. That's important. And it's obviously putting pressure on the d4 pawn. So eventually we're going to win the pawn back. Black drops the bishop back to b6. And one great thing about this line is that it gives you a chance to carry out the Greek gift sacrifice. A ton of people end up castling here, and this loses the game on the spot to a classic instance of the Greek gift. Bishop h7, knight g5 check, and you know the drill. King g6, queen g4, etc. So you can definitely win your fair share of games in this line with a Greek gift sacrifice. Now, obviously, black does not need to fall for the Greek gift. And if we go back to this position, which is actually in my analysis, this is a legitimate theoretical position in this line. The way that black can avoid the Greek gift is either by delaying castling, black can play bishop d7, or black can situate a knight on g6 and prevent the bishop from taking on h7. But at this point, white can already win the pawn back, and after bishop g6, hg, knight, I think the move here is actually to throw in h3 to take the sting out of queen h4. And according to the engine, the engine sometimes gives a small edge for white. And when we're going to take back on d4, and we're going to support the knight with c3, and we're going to leave black with this terrible French bishop on c8. So there's a lot of theory in this line, and black has many ways to equalize, but nonetheless, there's a good amount of meat on the bone in this line. Now, I'm sure we're going to face the French again, and we're going to face it at a higher level. So remember, the kind of idea of the speedrun is for me to introduce opening ideas slowly. When we're at like 12 to 1300, I'm talking more about concepts. I'm talking about some basic theory. And as we rise through the ranks, I'll start talking more specifically and give you actual lines and actual analysis. So the basic idea of this line is to develop your king side very quickly and make sure that whatever you do, you don't give up the pawn on e5 easily. Now, at a high level, people who understand the French understand that one of black's main weapons in these types of positions is a move like f6. Black can try to physically get rid of the e5 pawn. But white's not giving that pawn away easily. And here white has the very strong response, bishop b5. Now you might say, well, wait a second, didn't I mention earlier that bishop b5 is a misplaced bishop in this line? Well, again, the situation has changed completely as a result of the move f6. And here bishop b5 should make perfect sense to you. You're taking the sting out of f takes e5. Now knight takes e5 is incredibly strong because you're attacking from both sides. Queen h5 is a threat and knight takes c6 is a threat. So bishop b5 is a prophylactic measure against f takes e5. Okay? So f6 is not a panacea either. It's a risky move. And if black knows what they're doing, then he can get away with it. But in any case, our opponent took a different approach. Knight c6, bishop d3, and our opponent decided not to take on d4 at all, and instead to push c4, which already gives white a sizable advantage after the move bishop e2. This is already a sizable advantage for white according to the engine. I've analyzed this line because it's very, very common at the lower levels to push c4. So I think b5 is a further inaccuracy. I don't think it's a terrible move, but I actually think black's main mistake early in the opening was this move queen b6. I feel like after a4, black's queen side is already collapsing, and it would not be too radical to say that black is borderline lost here. Like with the queen side totally gone, black's king side is undeveloped. It's plus over minus at this point. So I think the last chance for black to keep his queen side relatively well protected was to play what? Who can tell me a decent move for black here that allows them to keep the queen side, you know, more or less defended? And you might remember what I mentioned about a4 and why a4 is so strong in this position. Yeah, bishop b7 or maybe bishop d7. The engine likes putting the bishop on d7, which makes some sense. It's a little bit more centralized than the bishop on b7. And after a4, black plays a6, and black holds on. The queen side is still intact, and then black will try to get you know, these kingside pieces out. Knight ge7, knight f5 is a very typical maneuver in the French. White is better. And from white's side, I wouldn't even rush with a4. White has this interesting move in such positions to actually just push the h-pawn. And your idea is to push it all the way to h5, and maybe even to h6 to provoke dark square weaknesses on the king side. And the secondary idea is to prevent the black knight from jumping into g6, which is a super typical kind of parking spot in these positions. Furthermore, you also take the sting out of the move knight f5, because now the g-pawn comes to the rescue with g4. So without the pawn on h5, if you think about it, let's make a couple of random moves. Let's say white plays c3, and white plays a developing move, and black puts the knight on f5. Here, the move g4, and this is very common in the French, you should remember this, g4 in this version is not effective. Who can tell me why? What does black have in response to g4 here that he wouldn't have had with the pawn already on h5? Yeah, there's this very nasty move knight h4. And you've bitten off more than you can chew on the king side because after the trade, you've got all of these weird kind of weaknesses on the king side. You can't go knight f3. This pawn is sticking out like a sore thumb. Black can go h5 later. So compared to the position after the pawn appears on h5, here after g4, the rook controls h4. So the knight is pushed back to e7 or back to h6. So this is why closed positions are difficult to play, because there are all of these like subtleties, and everything really does boil down to
to nuances and to who can position their pieces better, who understands more ideas about the position. And this is a good example of that. How does bishop d7 solve the a takes b5 weakness, asks Taper Knight. Well, it solves the problem because after a4, a6, the queen and the rook are connected. So a takes b5 is no longer effective. You're not losing the rook on a8. You can just recapture with the queen. And of course, with the bishop still on c8, the rook is unprotected. So queen b6 is a good move conceptually. Our opponent understood that he needs to protect the pawn chain on the queen side, but forgot, I would imagine, that a6 is no longer effective with the rook on a8 unprotected. Dark Tigger asks, was a4 before b3, that's a mouthful, a valid continuation? So I would say not as much, and the reason why consists in the move b4. The presence of this move would make a4 futile. And now if you were to play b3, after c3, black has buried your entire queen side under a pile of rubble. This is a nightmare scenario because you're never getting your knight out without sacrificing it. This is what you want to avoid, and I could show you a bunch of games like this. So, and if you play c3, then black can again try to bury you with the move b3. This is not quite as disastrous, but clearly white has not achieved anything positive on the queen side. Clearly, white has not achieved anything positive. So in this case, you actually want to fix the root of the pawn chain first so that black can't play b4 or run the risk of losing the c4 pawn. So in any case, queen b6, a4, bishop a6. Now we clear the shrubbery on the queen side, and we leave black with a massive pawn weakness on c4, as well as a wide open queen side that we can use to infiltrate later on with the move rook b1. So I think the main theme of the middle game was how we managed to switch at the drop of a hat from one plan to another, right? So our initial plan, which we would have put into effect after a move like rook d8, was to first play c3 and then play knight bd2 and surround the pawn on c4, which is really easy to do because black can't defend this pawn. If queen b5, then the simplest move here, I think, is just queen to e2. And I should point out that black can try to go knight d5 and counterattack the c3 pawn. But here, we can kind of switch gears a little bit and go knight to e4. Very typical square in this particular type of structure. And there's basically no rush to win the pawn on c4. We can use the other knight and drop it back to d2. So notice how we apportion the roles here. The knight defends c3 and contests the d6 square, while the other knight is going to drop back and win the c4 pawn. So black's not going to give away the pawn that easily. So if you play knight f2 here, black might go knight a5. But at this point, we can clear off the d6 square, another very typical idea in the French. Bishop c1 to a3. Devastating move. Absolutely devastating. Because after the trade, knight d6 is a totally unstoppable idea. Black's also falling apart here on the queen side. That knight on a5 is very poorly defended. White's going to go rook to b1 and dislodge the queen. This is +5 already. So it gets bad really, really quickly. In any case, our opponent goes f6, and we switch gears. Here we just grab the pawn on f6. Maybe not the best move, but definitely the simplest approach to the position. And we switch from attacking the c4 pawn to attacking the more relevant weakness, which is, of course, e6, because that's the pawn which is standing between our pieces and black's king. Now, king f7 is clearly a decisive mistake. And after knight g5 check, king e7 loses immediately. It accelerates the process. King g8 would have allowed black to stay in the game for a bit longer. Here we would have taken on e6 with the knight. And on the next move, we can switch back to our old idea. We can go queen e2 and win the pawn on c4. So this is obviously a totally indefensible position for black. It's around +4. But perhaps black can hold on here. I don't know. The answer suggests h5. That tells you all you need to know about this position. Rick Gava asks, could we go queen e2 instead of rook e1? Absolutely, and I even pointed this out. The reason I rejected queen e2 is because I didn't want to deal with the complications after knight takes d4. And to reiterate the line that I presented during the game, this position I was not entirely sure how to evaluate, because as winning as it looks for white, there is only one piece in the attack. It's the queen. So with the engine on, I see that white is in fact completely winning, but not with queen c6 check. This would be a very hasty move. Notice that after king f7, the rooks are connected and white loses the attack. The move is actually just rook e1, simple chess. Attack the bishop on e7, force the black queen to return to d7, and what has been the consequence of that? Well, now the c4 pawn is finally unprotected. We could grab it, and on the next move, bishop a3 is going to create devastating threats against black's bishop on e7. Okay? And notice that black also can't castle. That's a very important function of keeping the queen on this diagonal. So in any case, this was winning, but we decided to play it even simpler with rook e1. Perhaps black should have played a move like knight d8 to at least try to cling to this pawn on e6, but my idea here was just to go c3 and revert back to our initial idea. Bishop e7, just go knight bd2. At least here black can castle and the game continues. At least here the game continues, but with an extra pawn, black's position is in shambles. The pawn on e6 is a terrible weakness. We've got a beautiful pawn chain on the queen side. This is around +3, so the game goes on, but white is obviously technically winning. So a simple game, nothing special, but nonetheless, I think a good illustration of basic ideas, and I'm not commentating past this point. This is all very obvious. I think a good illustration of nice play with a close center, typical ideas in the Nimzowitsch French, which is the first time that we faced the French, was this game, and takeaways involve ideas of attacking what may seem to be an imposing pawn chain on the queen side. So it's not always about how much space your opponent controls. It's also about how well defended the pawn chain is. And you can use your pawns in many cases to what I would call clear the shrubbery. Just like blast through what seems to be an imposing pawn chain. And as a consequence of that, you often leave your opponent with just a jumble of weaknesses that you can then attack. And the most common way of doing that is by pushing b3 and then pushing a4. And very importantly, if you're on the black side of a position like this, make sure that the rook on a8 is protected so that you can push a6 and at least support the pawn on b5. All right? So that's what I'll say, folks. I would get another game in, but I think it's getting pretty late. I have lost in a speedrun, but it's only been to cheaters.